Let's move on to Scour now. And I don't know if you know this, but I did an interview with Derek Engeman of Scour. So, of course, me being the Pantera mark that I am, I know Scour because of Phil Anselmo. But one of the awesome things about this Scour record is that you wouldn't even know Phil Anselmo is on it unless you knew Phil Anselmo was on it, because it doesn't sound like Phil at all. Let me start by reading kind of the press junket on this gun. So the album is called Gold. So Scour is the extreme metal collective featuring an impressive lineup of heavy music veterans, including Philip Anselmo of Pantera and Down, Derek Engeman of Philip Anselmo and the Illegals, John Jarvis of Agoraphobic Nosebleed and Nest, Mark Klopel of Misery Index, and Adam Jarvis of Pig Destroyer, Misery Index, and Lockup. They've just released their long-awaited debut full-length Gold. Came out yesterday on February 21st via Housecore Records, which is Phil Anselmo's label in North America, and it's going to come out via Nuclear Blast in Europe. So deepening the experience set forth in Scour's previously released EP trilogy, Gold pulls the listener through a blistering vortex of speed, aggression, and above all, absolute horror. Drawing from a deep framework of literary horror masterworks, Gold guides the listener beyond the realm of death and through the metaphysical anomalies of a disheveled and decaying mind, in so which the pall of a savage universe is lifted, an inconceivable puppet master revealed, the remaining self of the listener excruciatingly dissolved and left asking, who is it that pulls the strings? Musically, Scour fuses the raw aggression of black metal with grindcore, punk, and thrash influences, manifesting a sound that honors extreme metal's roots while pushing it into modern territory. Their minimalist approach is relentless and brutal, perfectly embodying this vision. Gold, which features cover art by Kane Gillis, is available on CD, LP, limited edition cassette, and digital formats. Scour elevates their intensity with this first full-length album, Gold, which includes a guest guitar solo by Gary Holt of Slayer and Exodus. Recording for Gold began in February of 2023 at Nosferatu's Lair, Philip Anselmo's personal studio and rehearsal space, which saw the band highly engaged in a concentrated effort toward a truly diabolical composition. With Anselmo leading the charge at every turn, one would often find the entire band in the control room in ecstatic debate, meticulously mulling over every blast beat and dive bomb. The album was intermittently refined and lyrical concept finalized over the course of 2023 as touring schedules would allow. Let's play just a little bit of the interview that I did with Derek. Do you write? So one of the things I think is kind of cool too is some of my favorite tracks on the record kind of come after those little interludes. Do you write those interludes as well?
I had written on the EPs. The first one I wrote, the other two was like a collaboration with myself and Malcolm Pugh from Inferi.
Okay.
But the ones on this record were actually done by Phil.
Oh, himself. Wow.
And John Jarvis helped him with that.
So, fun fact, Phil Anselmo did all of the interludes on this album. So let's get started. Let's listen to it. So we're going to get started with this Scour record. The first track is called Cross. All right, so right out the gate, that is heavy as shit. And it's, again, if you're a fan of Pantera, this sounds nothing like Pantera. And even the vocals, like I said, in this opening track, you would not know that was Phil Anselmo if you just kind of heard it in passing, right? It doesn't sound like what the music on that on this opening track kind of reminds me, and this is coming from a black metal novice, so I don't get come at me like, oh, you know, before that. It reminds me of Cradle of Filth. The riff pattern and kind of like the way that it's the haunting kind of like, I think they have some kind of keys or like a pad or an organ behind the guitar riffs. But even the chord progression and the way that it's speedily played, but I like the vocals on this a lot better, I think, than I like on a Cradle of Filth track. So anyway, the next track, let's get into the next track. And this is Scour's new record, Gold, full length, new release, full length. And this next track is called Blades. Let's give it a listen. All right. Also, absolutely brutal track. I mean, this is two great albums today, by the way. This is so far, these first two tracks, insanely heavy, just really great, brutal, primal, fucking black metal. And this song, you know, continues that trend, builds on the second one. This one has a little bit more of a punk rock edge to it, especially kind of like the breakdown has this kind of slide riff that's really cool. It might be a chorus. There's not really like a chorus hook or anything, but it's kind of got this little sliding riff. Like, you know, obviously starts out with a real heavy kind of blast beat and then kind of breaks into this punk rockish slidey thing. That's the best way for me to describe it. So let's get into the next track. Is called Infusorium, and this one has a little bit more of a background behind it, and I believe is the first single on the record. Let's play it. Wow. Very cool track. Kind of opens with this haunting kind of melodic riff and then breaks into like the full black metal, you know, blast beat thing. But then there's this really cool break in the middle with a guitar solo and this haunting, just really beautiful kind of build back into, you know, the crescendo of the song before it ends. But Derek actually talked a little bit about this in our interview with him. So let me see if I can. So the kind of like press info I was reading about the record said that it was largely influenced by horror films. Like, is each song kind of referencing a horror film or inspired by a horror film, or like how does that kind of work out?
I think in general, just the horror influence is there always, but specifically for our track, the Infusorium, that was based around a short story or a novel by a local New Orleans horror author, John Paget. It's from this book called Greater Ventriloquism, and there's actually a short story called the Infusorium. So that track specifically references that. So it was like kind of a perfect song to make a video for, because it had this horror theme and kind of had the idea already laid out. A lot of the other Scour songs are like pretty, they've got some obscure lyrics, so it kind of touches on a bunch of different stuff, but that was very focused on that.
So there you have it. The track Infusorium was actually written by, well, it's based on a short story by a guy named John Paget. So we're going to move on to the next track now, which is an interlude called Ornaments, which, as Derek explained in our earlier clip, Phil Anselmo created these interludes. So this one is kind of just has some kind of deep piano plinking and like a distorted voice, and it sounds like music. What's the word? Score music from a horror movie. Very kind of short little interlude here. So we're gonna move into the next full track, which is called Coin, and here we go. So this one has a lot of really cool guitar work in it. And again, I think a lot of really punk rock edge to it. Some of the breakdown parts near the end are kind of punk rock tinged. So we're gonna move into the next song on the record, which is called "Evil." So this one's got that really big kind of organ backed, very black metal opening. The listening to this makes me realize a couple things. First of all, how much punk influence there is in black metal. It's a lot of like very fast, kind of like back and forth. The similar kind of like punk chord progressions. But also, I love being able to spend my day smoking, drinking coffee, and listening to black metal or metal of any kind. So, cheers for that. Well, what is the next song called, you ask? Well, I've got it for you right here. The next track that we are going to discuss on this record is very similar. It's just got, you just take evil and you add a D. And what do you got? You got devil. Very cool track. So there's some really cool melodic guitar work, especially near the end, kind of on the play out. But also there's a point where Phil kind of does his like Phil Anselmo, like his deep voice talkover thing that you start to get tones of like Phil Anselmo that you know and love in this track a little bit near the end. There's a little bit of this earlier on too, but it's much more noticeable, I think, in this track Devil than any of the previous ones, especially right before the kind of guitar blowout at the end. I shouldn't say blowout. It's like a really cool melodic interplay at the end of the track. So the next track is called Contaminated, and it is an interlude. I think I'm just going to talk over these interludes a little bit since I can probably get away with it. The rest of the tracks I have to edit and speed up before I broadcast so I don't get the copyright thing and I can kind of talk about these. But for these, this is kind of a cool little interlude part. It's almost like score music from a horror film. You've got some kind of abrasive, almost like sandy noises happening with like some background plinking on like a little piano and some what's a good word to use, dissonant kind of keys bending, like the total horror movie style film score for a horror movie sounds you're getting here. Almost like you could hear someone like like in a horror film, someone's like taking a shower and you're like, you get the first person of the killer like sneaking in with the knife to take them out, you know? Now there's these cool little glitch noises, I guess. Let's move on to the next track called Hell. All right, that song has probably some of my favorite riffing on the album so far. It's got this kind of a gallopy vibe to it. And then he does this kind of like it's almost, what's the best way to describe it? It's almost like an arpeggio, but it's almost like a clockwise thing, like a dun 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 dun, dun, like a up and down, like a bum 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 bum. So he does this like, so it's got this really almost like a Maiden-esque gallop, but like Maiden on speed, Maiden on crystal meth. This really, the death metal gallop. Anyway, that's the vibe of it, coupled with that kind of like I explained, that up and down riff, that dun 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 ba da da. Some of the coolest riffing on the record so far, guitar wise, I think. And very cool track in hell there. So now we're going to move on to the next song, which is called Invoke. Here we go. All right, that another brutal track. At one point near the end of the song, they start going "All hail Satan," "Give yourself to Satan," all this kind of stuff. Very appropriate black metal, chanting, chorus, whatever you want to call it. But another great track. I don't know what else to say about it other than "All hail Satan." So let's move on to the next song, which is, of course, the title track on the record, and it's called Gold. Very cool track. Obvious why it's the title track. I think one of the things that's cool about this type of music too is the density of it, the amount of stuff that you're able to cram into a song. This song, Gold, the title track, is a little over, I think, like almost 5 minutes, like 4.5 minutes, but it seems like a lifetime because there's so much stuff kind of crammed into it, so there's one last interlude track on the album, and I'm going to do again kind of what I did last time and just play that as we talk over this little thing. So much more interesting, almost like it's got like some strings that sound like a buzzing, like a swarm, almost definitely a very intense buildup here. That layer, almost like a siren now, and you hear these kind of, wow, that's cool. That's really cool, actually. I might even have to like sample that for like a rap beat or something. That's really cool. So there's this kind of eerie little echo effect, like heavily reverbed plinks. I wonder if this is all strings. I'm sure they did this all with a keyboard. Maybe not. But nowadays, like the ability to do this kind of symphonic arrangement stuff and make it sound legit with a keyboard the technology is just unbelievable, which is why a lot of bands can tour with, keyboardist or, sample triggers instead of having to hire an entire orchestra when they do this kind of stuff. So, okay. So the final song on this album, Scour's debut album, that was the last interlude, Angels. And so this very last track is called Serve. All right. Probably my favorite track on the album, this last one, Serve. I would describe it as epically brutal. It just has all the elements of good black metal, kind of like the eerie yet melodic, and epic kind of guitar arrangements, but then also just the super fast, brutal black metal drums and vocals. And man, it was interesting because I kind of we did two different albums today, the Killswitch Engage record and this one, the Scour record. And they're both incredible metal albums for different reasons. This one obviously much more focused on just like extremity and brutality with elements of kind of, horror and melody and harmony kind of intertwined, but just the black metal thing is just, it's sheer brutality, just that fast, those blast beats and so a different level, I guess, of brutality, whereas the Killswitch record was a lot more kind of different elements of punk and grind and metal kind of mixed together with like catchy sing-songy hooks. So those are the two records we covered today. That's a 2-hour session, which I'm going to cut this up, obviously, and make it a little bit shorter so people don't have to watch me bob my head to the songs for 5 minutes as I listen to them. But thank you for joining us. Check out these records, go stream them, and smash that like and subscribe button. And we'll see you next time.